Making a spectacular seafood cocktail campechano is within everybody's reach. I'm going to show you how to do this glorious thing. So everybody will wonder what is the difference between a Mexican shrimp cocktail and a cocktail campechano. Well, it's very simple. The cocktail campechano, when anything is called campechano in Mexican Spanish, it means that there's a mixture of a whole lot of things. Shrimp cocktail will just be shrimp. A cocktail campechano will be similar to that, but with a mixture of seafood. And it's always served in a much bigger quantity, which means that you don't want the sauce to be quite so intense. At least I don't. I don't want it to be quite so intense as what you would find in a Mexican-style shrimp cocktail that you might have in smaller portions. But if you've ever seen me make the Mexican style shrimp cocktail, which I've done in other videos, you'll notice as I'm making the sauce that it's sort of related to that. It has a similar flavor profile. Now, to make this version, my favorite version of a cocktail campechano, I'm going to start by making a kind of quick ceviche. So I've got some ocean fish here, and I'm sort of emphasizing ocean here because you don't really want to do ceviche with freshwater fish for a lot of health reasons. So I've got some halibut here. You could use snapper, you could use grouper. Pretty much any of the large ocean fish will be fine for making this ceviche. But you want it to be what we would call sashimi quality. That's not something that comes from our government. It's just what the fishmongers would say is their absolute freshest stuff to make ceviche out of. So this halibut was the freshest thing that I could find. And now I've squeezed some lime juice here. Got about a half a cup to go over this 6-ounce fillet. And I'm just going to sort of let everything float freely in the lime juice. I'm going to set that to the side. We're going to come back to it in just a little bit, and it will have started to cook on the outside, meaning that the exterior of each of those pieces of that fresh halibut will have started to turn a little bit white. That's a sort of similar to a cooking process, but done with acid instead of heat. But you want to always start with something that's very, very fresh. Now, for the other seafood that goes in here, I like to start with a pound of cooked seafood. And what I have in front of me here is a half a pound of small shrimp. The size, they sell shrimp by sizes. This would be the ones that are 4160. And those are already cooked and cut up into sort of bite-sized pieces. You don't have to cut them up if you don't want to, but I think it mixes more readily with everything else here. The other thing that's in here is octopus. Now, if you go into any Mexican market, you can find all of the stuff to make a cocktail campechano ready for you. They will have octopus cooked and cut up for you to just go home and mix up your own cocktail campechano. They'll have the cooked shrimp. You could actually use, say, 6 ounces of fresh picked crab in this to make it super luxurious. You could add some scallops to it. There's lots of choices that you have here, but I'm just going to say you start with about a pound of cooked seafood ready to go. Now, that doesn't mean that everything does have to be cooked, but you're going to have to make your own decisions in that. I like scallops raw, so I would buy those little scallops and just put them in here raw, or throw them in with the fish over there and let them ceviche just a little bit. So I'm going to set that aside. We have one more thing to add to that. That is some oysters. Now, oftentimes when you add raw oysters to this mixture, the name of the cocktail changes and it becomes vuelve a la vida, which means return to life, which is a reference to too much partying on Saturday night and you go out and have this cocktail on Sunday morning to bring you back to life. So vuelve a la vida, or you can just continue to call it a cocktail campechano. Now, I'm using these little oysters that we just love in our restaurants that are called cumiais, and they are raised in beds in Ensenada Bay and south in Baja. And they are such a beautiful flavor because the waters of Ensenada Bay are so cold. So I really love it. I'm going to show you, I just thought it would be fun to do this. This is an oyster knife. It's not the best oyster knife at all, but you could use an oyster knife to open your oysters with. But to tell you the truth, I have never worked as an oyster shucker, and I'm embarrassed about that, so I'm not fast like the oyster shuckers. The guys that do it in our restaurant are just so incredibly fast, and I should just do a month in that station so that I got to be really fast. So I'm a real amateur at this thing, and I'll tell you that in my house when I shuck oysters, I always grab a screwdriver, and I know that that's anathema to a lot of people, but it's a little smaller, and it goes right in. Where you're going here is the joint here at the pointy end of the oyster. And what you're trying to do is just to go in here and then just twist it back and forth until you get the thing to pop. Okay, so it just popped open. You can see it move there. Then I always switch back to the oyster knife. If I had a better oyster knife, I could probably do a better job with it. And you scrape across the top shell here. You just scrape across it like that to free that top shell. And you can pull that off. And then you use your oyster knife to go down here and to release it from that muscle that holds it into the shell. If we were going to serve these on the half shell, of course, we would flip them over, which I'm having trouble doing now, like that, so that they look plump and beautiful on the top, and then serve them with your condiments and so forth. Here, we're just going to mix them with the other oysters, and I want all of that oyster liquid that's there to go in with the rest of this seafood here. Okay, now it's time to start building the sauce here. So we've got our seafood here, and as with a typical Mexican shrimp cocktail, we're going to make the sauce with a base of ketchup, but it's going to get diluted with a lot of other things. So it's not a strongly ketchup-based sauce, but you get the advantages of ketchup, which are it's a super umami-packed flavor. To me, this ketchup is going to add not only consistency to this, but it's going to add this full, rich flavor to it. The second thing that we're going to do is to add a little bit, if you cook your own seafood, you won't have to do this, a little bit of clam juice to it. You can buy bottles of clam juice in most grocery stores. They come in little 8-ounce bottles, but they're really good for adding extra oomph to any kind of a seafood dish, but especially if you're making this kind of a seafood cocktail. So that's going to go in there. The spice is going to be Mexican hot sauce, just as with a classic Mexican shrimp cocktail sauce. I'm eyeing it. I'm going to put about 4 tablespoons of this in here. I'm using Tamazula. Some people prefer Valentina, or the slightly sweeter buffalo. A couple of tablespoons of olive oil, optional, but I highly recommend it. It gives you a beautiful, rich mouthfeel, so I like that part of it. And then the next thing that we're going to put in here is the ringer ingredient here, and that is Clamato. So this may really surprise you, but this is a product that was actually developed originally in Baja, in Mexicali, in one of the big towns right along the US border. And it is a blend basically of tomato juice and clam juice. So we've already had some clam juice go in here, so it's sort of reinforcing that flavor. But this not only has the tomato and clam, but it also has a little heat to it and some other herbs and spices that go in there. It was developed in Baja, but it was commercialized by the Mott Company. Now, if you don't find this in your local grocery store, you certainly can find it in any Mexican grocery store, because lots of people like to make micheladas, the beer cocktail. They like to make it with Clamato. A lot of people just like to drink it straight. It's not my favorite thing to drink straight, but it's absolutely spectacular in this dish here. So I need a cupful of this. So this is going to kind of dilute it just a little bit from what it would be if we were going to be making the traditional Mexican shrimp cocktail sauce. And I'm going to stir all of that up. And then we have all of our other flavorings that are going to go in here. So you can see how this is very Campechano. This is lots of different ingredients going together to make one spectacular thing. onions and cilantro for any kind of like raw ingredient thing like this, salsa, shrimp cocktail, any kind of seafood cocktail would be expected. The onions you see I had in a strainer. That's because after I chopped them, I rinsed them off. Standard procedure, certainly for me, using any kind of raw onion in a salsa, guacamole, in any dish like this that's going to require the raw onion. Keeps it super fresh flavor and not with the pungency that a lot of people associate with raw onion. A little chopped cilantro is going to go in here now. And then the last ingredients, vegetable-wise, that are going to go in here are tomatoes and some avocado. So I'm going to cut these all up into small pieces now. And then we'll come back and finish this beautiful Coctel Campechano. Okay, we're coming down the home stretch here with our Coctel Campechano. I'm going to add this sort of ceviche fish, 20 or 30 minutes. I want it to still be kind of raw on the inside. I'm going to add it with the lime juice. You can see it's turning opaque white on the outside of that. You could leave this set longer if you wanted it to be more done than that, but I'm going to add it with the lime juice. We need the lime juice in all of this. And then I'm going to taste it and see where we are spicy wise, because I could always add a little bit more Mexican hot sauce. I could add, I know it'll need a little bit more tanginess. Ooh, it's just in the, for me, it's just about right. But the tanginess that I'm thinking about is this special stuff that you find anywhere that they sell seafood in Mexico, in the central part of Mexico over to Veracruz. It's called Salsa Bruja. Now, I have another video where I show you how to make this beautiful spiced vinegar. And I'm going to add a little bit of it to this mixture here, a couple of tablespoons worth. You can see that it's got onions and jalapenos and arbol chilies and carrots and a whole bunch of spices and some herbs that are in there. And you just let this marinate for 2 or 3 days at minimum, 2 or 3 months. Actually is great working with this. So I'm going to take a couple of tablespoons of the vinegar. So this stuff is super delicious. It's very seasoned, and it just adds a special quality. If you think your Coctel Campechano needs a little more acid, just add a little more lime juice to it if you don't have this special Salsa Bruja vinegar here. And then the last thing that we're going to put in here is the chopped tomato and the diced avocado. So we'll slide all of that in. I'm going to save out just a little bit of this avocado to use as a garnish, like that. And then just kind of mush it all together, being gentle to basically fold in all of that avocado there. And then we're going to give it another taste and see where we are flavor-wise. We've added a lot of unseasoned vegetables to it now, so I'm going to just take a little taste of that part of it and see what I think. Usually it needs just a touch more salt. Yeah. Usually it takes about a teaspoon more of salt. So I'm going to sprinkle that over the top, mix it in, and we're ready to serve. Okay. Well, you have quite a treat here when you finish all of this. It's typically served in those old-fashioned malt glasses in Mexico. Beer glass works. That's what I have here. And I'm just going to spoon some of it into the spoon. I'm just going to spoon it in here. And this one, because of the way it's seasoned and because it's such a special thing, is usually served in large portions, and it is really the meal. Okay, so that's why you would serve it in such a beautiful large portion there. I'll take a little bit of the chopped diced avocado to go over the top of it. If you have a little extra chopped onion, that's common in Mexico to put on top of it as well. Certainly a nice sprig of cilantro can go on there. Just as with the Mexican shrimp cocktail, Coctel Campechano is mostly served with saltine crackers in Mexico, which may surprise some of you, but they don't eat many saltines in Mexico, and when they eat these sort of seafood cocktails, that's become the tradition. I personally like it better with tortilla chips, so that's what I'm serving on the side of it. My mouth is watering. I gotta say goodbye because I gotta dive into that beauty. I hope you'll make a Coctel Campechano for some special guests.